They had expected her to weep. When the soldiers of the Galactic Empire had dragged Earth's last surviving officer before the High Tribunal, they had expected cries, fear, and the silent terror that most species displayed when faced with the vast, crushing weight of imperial judgment. But the woman who knelt before them did not bow her head. She did not tremble. She simply stared, her green eyes sharp, unyielding, and filled with something the Empire could not understand: defiance. The chamber of the High Tribunal was designed to induce submission. Its walls were towering black obelisks pulsing with subdued, mind-dulling light. The air was laced with pheromonic dampeners meant to quell aggression, and the sheer presence of the tribunal's judges, tall, regal beings with elongated skulls and eyes like endless voids, was enough to break the wills of the strongest warriors in the known galaxy. But the woman in the center of the room remained unaffected, her body still, her gaze unwavering. "You are Lieutenant Commander Aaron Salas of the Terran Defense Corps?" the Grand Arbiter intoned, his voice a glacial rumble that sent shivers through the lesser races gathered as witnesses. She tilted her head slightly, the corner of her lip twitching in what might have been amusement. "If you already know the answer, why bother asking?" A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Grand Arbiter's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. Irritation, curiosity, perhaps even the tiniest flicker of unease. "You stand accused of orchestrating the last resistance against the Empire," he continued. "Earth has fallen. Humanity is no more. Yet you fought to the last. Why?" Silence stretched between them. Aaron let it sit, let the weight of it hang over the gathered aliens like a storm cloud. Then, with slow deliberation, she lifted her chin and spoke. "Because we could." The Grand Arbiter exhaled slowly, a sound like shifting tectonic plates. "Your world is gone. Your species extinct. Your war was meaningless." Aaron smiled then, small, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real. "If it was meaningless, then why are you afraid?" The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier, tense. The gathered aliens shifted uncomfortably. Somewhere in the crowd, a minor official swallowed hard. The Grand Arbiter's grip on his staff tightened. "You are mistaken. The Empire fears nothing." She met his gaze and leaned forward slightly. "Then why am I still alive?" A tremor passed through the gathered officials. It was a simple question, but it struck deep. The Empire did not take prisoners. Not for long. Enemies were to be subjugated or erased. And yet, they had brought her here. They had given her a trial. They had spoken to her, measured her, tested her reactions. And despite their proclamations of dominance, she stood before them, whole, unharmed, and utterly undaunted. The Grand Arbiter remained still for a long moment. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he gestured to the guards. "Take her to the holding chamber. We will reconvene tomorrow." Two towering reptilian sentries stepped forward, their scaled hands clamping onto her arms. She did not resist as they led her away, but she also did not lower her gaze. Even as the heavy doors of the chamber closed behind her, even as the dim corridors swallowed her in shadow, she remained steady. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the Empire's most secure stronghold, the seeds of doubt had been sown. The cell was simple. A smooth, metallic chamber with no furniture, no visible seams, no windows. A single light pulsed dully overhead, barely illuminating the space. There were no cameras that she could see, but Aaron knew better. The Empire watched everything. She sat in the center of the floor, stretching her legs out as if she were simply resting between training sessions back on Earth. The thought twisted something in her chest, but she pushed it aside. No time for grief. Not yet. Somewhere outside, beyond the impenetrable walls of her confinement, the Empire reeled. They would try to understand her. They would analyze her expressions, dissect her words, search for weaknesses. But they would not find what they expected, because Aaron Salas was no longer playing their game. A faint hiss echoed through the chamber. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a tall, willowy figure with skin like polished onyx. Their eyes shimmered like liquid silver, their posture carefully composed. A diplomat, then, or an interrogator? Lieutenant Commander Solace, the alien said, their voice smooth as silk. You are remarkably calm for a woman who has lost everything. Erin tilted her head. Have I? A flicker of confusion passed over the alien's face. Your people are gone. Your world reduced to ash. The war is over. What else remains? She met their gaze and smiled. You tell me. The alien hesitated, and in that hesitation, Erin knew she had already won the first battle. Outside the cell, the Grand Arbiter watched the exchange through a hidden screen, his expression unreadable. Beside him, a lower-ranked official shifted uneasily. She does not behave as expected, the official murmured. Her kind should be broken, lost, but she remains unshaken, the Grand Arbiter finished. He steepled his fingers, considering. Something about this human disturbed him. Not her words, not even her defiance, but the possibility that, even in the face of annihilation, she still believed humanity had not truly lost. And for the first time in his centuries-long reign, the Grand Arbiter felt something unfamiliar coil in his chest. Uncertainty. The interrogation chamber aboard the Imperial Dreadnought pulsed with the steady hum of alien machinery. High Admiral Zelverin observed the human prisoner through the reinforced observation pane. The woman, seated in the center of the sterile room, remained disturbingly calm. No chains bound her. No restraints held her in place. And yet, she did not attempt escape. Zelverin had overseen the subjugation of countless species. He had seen the cries of the broken, the screams of the conquered. But this human, this woman, sat there as if she were the one in control. Have we determined her rank? He asked his intelligence officer, a lean, sharp-eyed Eltari named Varos. The alien stiffened at the question. We've run all the biometrics. She's not military, not a political leader, not even a scientist. By all accounts, she was an ordinary citizen before her capture. Zelverin's mandibles clicked in irritation. Impossible. The resistance on Earth was formidable. If she is here, she must have value. Varos hesitated before continuing. Sir, that's the thing. We broke their front lines, crushed their armies, incinerated their cities, and yet, we never truly saw them surrender. Zelverin turned his gaze back to the human. What do you mean? They fought to the last. No terms, no negotiations, no cries for mercy. And even the civilians. Varos trailed off, as if the words were difficult to process. They did not break the way other species do. The Admiral's interest sharpened. And this woman? What does she know? Varos swallowed. We don't know, sir. She hasn't spoken a word. The door hissed open, and Zelverin stepped inside. The human woman turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze without flinching. He had expected fear, defiance, perhaps even rage. What he saw instead unsettled him, curiosity, as if she were the one studying him. Do you know why you are here? He asked. A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Because you're afraid. Zelverin stiffened. The translator had perfectly captured the nuance in her tone, the quiet confidence beneath it. It was not bravado. It was certainty. You are mistaken, he said coldly. The Empire fears nothing. We have crushed your world, eliminated your leaders, and eradicated your defenses. Humanity is finished. She tilted her head. Then why am I still alive? For a moment, Zelverin had no answer. He had expected defiance, but not this. He should have had her executed the moment she was captured. And yet, something had stopped him. Something irrational. Something he could not explain. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was unease. What is your name? He asked. Sarah. He narrowed his eyes. And your rank? She chuckled softly. I worked in logistics. Before the invasion, I managed supply chains for a supermarket. Varos, still standing at the entrance, twitched in confusion. A supermarket? Sarah nodded. That's right. Food, medicine necessities. All the things people need to keep going. Zelverin exhaled slowly. He had studied the great war strategists of the Empire, the tactical geniuses who had led conquests across the stars. None of them would have spared a second thought for a civilian worker. And yet, this woman radiated a presence that unsettled even him. What do you know of humanity's last stand? He asked. Her expression did not change. I know that you think you've won. Silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she added, "But you haven't." Hours later, in his private chamber, Zelverin replayed the conversation in his mind. There was something profoundly wrong about this entire situation. The war had been won, and yet there were no pleas for mercy, no efforts to surrender and integrate. Even in captivity, even in defeat, the humans remained defiant. The door chimed, and Varos entered. "Sir, we have a situation." Zelverin turned, mandibles tightening. "What now?" "There's been an incident in the lower decks. Several human prisoners escaped their cells. They sabotaged key systems before being subdued." Zelverin frowned. "How? Were they armed?" "No, sir. They used stolen maintenance tools and improvised weapons. They fought with sheer determination, with no regard for their own survival." The Admiral's unease deepened. He had seen broken prisoners before. He had seen species surrender, beg, and comply. But these humans did not act like the conquered. They acted like something else entirely, as if the war was not yet over. He thought back to Sarah's words, the certainty in her voice. "You think you've won, but you haven't." For the first time in his long career, High Admiral Zelverin felt something unfamiliar creep into his mind. Doubt. The cold metallic walls of Sarah's cell no longer felt unfamiliar. Days had passed. At least, she assumed so, though the Empire's artificial station lacked any true sense of time. Her rations arrived at irregular intervals, her interrogations unpredictable. The attempts to break her mind continued, but Sarah remained steadfast. Her defiance had become a spectacle among the officers. Whispers of her resilience spreading like wildfire through the ranks of the Galactic Empire. But today was different. When the cell door hissed open, it wasn't the usual detachment of guards who entered. Instead, a lone figure stepped through. Tall, draped in regal, obsidian-black robes, with piercing, luminescent eyes that seemed to see through her flesh, the being before her exuded authority. Grand Inquisitor Vadran. She had heard the name in passing, usually in hushed tones, accompanied by fear. This was no mere interrogator. Vadran was the mind behind the Empire's most ruthless psychological operations. His presence alone confirmed one thing. Sarah was no longer just a prisoner. She was now a puzzle, a threat, an anomaly the Empire couldn't ignore. Vadran's voice was like silk wrapped around steel. "Human, do you know why I'm here?" Sarah leaned back against the wall, folding her arms. "Because your other lackeys failed?" His expression remained unreadable. "Because you have shown us something we did not believe possible." He took a slow step forward, hands clasped behind his back. "Your species was supposed to be weak, conquered in mere days. Yet, despite your capture, your isolation, your helplessness, you show no fear." He tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Sarah smirked. "Maybe I'm just built differently." Vadran studied her, his gaze unnerving in its intensity. Then, without warning, he extended a hand. The air between them rippled, and suddenly, a force gripped Sarah's throat. Not choking, not painful, but an overwhelming sensation of power pressing against her body. "Fear," Vadran murmured. "I can make you feel it. I can strip you of your bravado, layer by layer, until you're raw, until you beg." Sarah gasped, but did not break. She forced a laugh through the pressure. "Is that what you tell yourself? That fear is something you can force on people." The force holding her vanished. She dropped to her knees, coughing, but when she looked up at Vadran, her eyes were filled not with fear, but with amusement. "You don't get it, do you?" she said hoarsely. "Fear isn't something you impose. It's something we choose, and I choose not to give you the satisfaction." Vadran's eyes narrowed. "You amuse yourself, but your situation is dire. The Empire does not tolerate defiance. Then why haven't you killed me?" Silence. For the first time, Vadran hesitated, and Sarah saw it. That flicker of doubt, of frustration. He had tortured countless beings, had broken the wills of creatures far more advanced, more dangerous than humanity. And yet, he could not break one human woman. Sarah pushed herself to her feet, stepping closer. "That's why you're scared, isn't it?" she whispered. "Because if one human can stand against you, What happens if the rest of us do? Vadran's expression darkened. You assume your kind has a chance. She grinned. I know we do. Then the alarms blared. The station trembled. Vadran's gaze snapped to the door, his communication device crackling with urgent voices. Inquisitor. Unknown forces are attacking. Human ships. Impossible numbers. Vadran's head slowly turned back to Sarah, realization dawning. It wasn't just her. The humans had come. The station lurched again, and the lights flickered as the impact of human weaponry battered its hull. Vadran's usually impassive face betrayed something new, uncertainty. Sarah saw it and relished it. She stepped forward, rolling her shoulders. Looks like your empire just got a wake-up call. Vadran ignored her, tapping into his communicator. Deploy all available fighters. Reinforce the perimeter. I want these vermin. Static. He froze. The device crackled, but no coherent words came through. Then, a new voice, clear, deliberate, and distinctly human. This is Captain Elias Carter of the UEG Vanguard Fleet. To all Empire personnel, you are under siege. Stand down, release all human captives, and surrender your station. Resist, and you will not live to regret it. Sarah grinned. Elias? Damn, you actually made captain? Vadran turned sharply to her. You knew this was coming? Sarah raised her wrists, rattling her cuffs. I mean, I hoped, but I wasn't exactly in the loop. A second tremor rippled through the station, followed by a distant explosion. The room's overhead display flickered to show exterior cameras. Dozens of human ships swarming, weaving between Empire defenses like sharks among sluggish prey. The humans weren't just attacking. They were winning. Vadran exhaled slowly, a controlled breath to mask his growing unease. Your people are desperate. Their fleet is nothing but scavenged vessels and outdated tech. Sarah tilted her head. And yet, we're kicking your ass. Vadran's jaw clenched. He moved toward the door, but Sarah stepped in his way. He regarded her as if she were an insect blocking his path. Move, he ordered. She didn't. Instead, she held out her wrists. Since things aren't looking great for you, maybe uncuffing me is a good first step. He scoffed. You think I'd release you? Sarah smirked. If you don't, I'll make sure the first thing my people do when they storm this station is throw you out an airlock. The ship trembled again. This time, the emergency lights switched to red. Another explosion rocked the deck beneath their feet. Vadran hesitated. Sarah saw the war behind his eyes. His arrogance told him this battle was still salvageable, but logic whispered otherwise. Finally, with a frustrated growl, he pressed a command on his wrist device. The cuffs snapped open. Sarah flexed her fingers. Much better. Then she drove her fist into his face. Vadran staggered, his regal composure shattering as he stumbled against the wall. He wiped his lip, looking at the blood smeared across his fingers with something between shock and fury. You dare. Sarah grabbed his communicator and crushed it beneath her boot. Yeah, I dare. The door behind them burst open, and 2 Empire soldiers rushed in, only to be met with the barrels of human rifles. Sarah turned to see a familiar face leading the charge. Elias Carter stood tall in his combat armor, rifle in hand, his expression one of sheer determination. Sarah, she grinned. Took you long enough. He glanced at Vadran. She nodded. The Empire's top interrogator. I say we bag him. Vadran straightened, regaining some of his dignity. You think taking me prisoner will change the tide? The Empire is endless. Your species will be exterminated. Elias raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? The station groaned under another blast. The camera feeds above them showed what Vadran refused to accept. Empire ships retreating, their once mighty forces crumbling against the relentless human assault. Sarah leaned in close, whispering, You're not afraid of me, Vadran. You're afraid of what comes next. Vadran said nothing, because he knew she was right. The station's corridors were chaos. Empire forces, once confident in their dominion, now scrambled under the relentless human assault. Alarms blared. The scent of burning circuitry and scorched metal filled the air as explosions rocked the structure. The human fleet had breached the outer defenses and battle raged within. Elias led Sarah through the carnage, his squad clearing the path ahead. They moved with the precision of warriors who had fought for survival their entire lives. Every Empire soldier they encountered hesitated for a fraction too long, shaken by the realization that the enemy they had dismissed was now overrunning them. Sarah could feel it in the air. The fear. They reached the central command chamber, a grand war room filled with towering holographic displays detailing the station's remaining defenses. Several high-ranking officers were still there, shouting orders, trying to coordinate a retreat. But the moment Sarah and the humans entered, weapons raised, a suffocating silence fell over the room. Vadran stepped forward, blood still on his lip from Sarah's punch. He adjusted his uniform, as if still clinging to some semblance of control. "You're making a mistake," he said evenly. "Killing us will not break the Empire. It will only bring its wrath upon you." Sarah scoffed. "The wrath that's already losing?" Elias stepped up beside her. "The UEG isn't here to exterminate. We're here to end this war on our terms." One of the Empire commanders sneered. "You think you have terms to offer?" Sarah looked at the battlefield displays. Entire Empire squadrons had been routed. Human ships moved with an efficiency that belied their patchwork origins, taking down vessels that should have outclassed them. It wasn't just superior tactics. It was something else. The humans weren't afraid to die, and that made them unstoppable. She turned back to Vadran. "You know what's coming, don't you?" Vadran's jaw tightened. "Humanity is reckless, but you are not infinite. The Empire will recover." Sarah stepped closer, voice low. "Will it? How long do you think your people will stay in line once they see their so-called unstoppable rulers running scared?" She saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Elias threw a datapad onto the command table. "We intercepted your distress calls. No reinforcements are coming. The Empire's leadership is already discussing how to spin this. You're not a priority anymore. You're an embarrassment." One of the Empire officers, reptilian Ishari, let out a low growl. "You lie." Sarah simply gestured to the screens. "Do we?" The silence stretched. Then, for the first time, Vadran lowered his gaze. Elias didn't waste the moment. "Surrender the station. You and your officers live. Refuse, and we'll finish what we started." The weight of reality settled over the room. The proud, unshakable elite of the Galactic Empire, faced with an enemy they had mocked, were now backed into a corner. Finally, Vadran exhaled. Slowly, he reached for his communicator, not to call for aid, but to issue the order. "All remaining Empire personnel, stand down." The words felt heavier than any blast wave. Sarah leaned on the console, looking at him. "See? That wasn't so hard." Vadran's gaze was cold, but beneath it was something else. Not just anger, not just loss. Something deeper. Something dangerously close to respect. The surrender of the Empire station sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Word spread faster than any official report. Soldiers, officers, civilians, across 1,000 worlds, they whispered to the humans who had come, not with overwhelming numbers, but with an unbreakable spirit. A species that had defied their conquerors, not through superior technology, but through sheer defiance. And in the end, the Empire had bowed. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Capture Command Center, watching the transmission feeds. UEG forces were moving efficiently, securing the remaining pockets of resistance. But there was no bloodbath. The humans weren't here to exterminate. They were here to end the war. Elias joined her, arms crossed. "They'll try to cover it up, you know." Sarah nodded. "They'll spin it as a strategic repositioning. Pretend it never happened. But the people won't forget," Elias added. She exhaled. "No, they won't. Already, rebellions have begun stirring in distant systems. Alien species that had lived under the boot of the Empire for generations were seeing something they had never truly believed possible. A crack in the armor. A moment of weakness from their masters. And all it had taken was one woman refusing to break. Vadran was still on board, now a prisoner of war, but treated with dignity. He had not spoken much since the surrender, only observing, as if trying to understand how it had come to this. He had spent his life believing in the invincibility of the Empire, and now he stood in the ruins of that belief. Sarah found him standing in front of viewport, staring at the stars. When he noticed her, he didn't sneer or glower. He simply asked, "What happens now?" Sarah considered the question. Humanity had won this battle, but the war? That was another story. She could see the paths ahead. The Empire would not collapse overnight, but the fractures were spreading. Other species, once afraid to resist, would rise. Some would seek vengeance. Others would seek freedom. And humanity? They had just proven to the universe that they would never be conquered again. She looked at Vadran. "That depends." "On what?" he asked. Sarah gave a small, knowing smile. "On whether the Empire learns from this, or if they make the mistake of coming back." Vadran held her gaze for a long time. Then, slowly, he looked away, as if he already knew the answer. In the following weeks, as human forces pulled back and the station was repurposed as a stronghold for a growing resistance, the whispers only grew. Across the galaxy, people spoke of the day the unbreakable empire had faltered. They repeated the words of the human woman who had stood fearless in the face of tyranny. Her name was spoken with admiration, with fear, with hope. And far beyond, in the darkened halls of the Empire's capital, the rulers of the known galaxy sat in silence, watching the footage of Sarah's defiance. For the first time in millennia, they felt something they had never expected: fear. And in the depths of the void, where empires rose and fell like waves on a shore, a single phrase took root, destined to be remembered long after the war had ended. All that remained were whispers among the stars, of a species that never surrendered, never knelt, never stopped.